This is the Ad Non-Tech Podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture, with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located in Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Dr. Matthew Stranick, and I am located in Scoodic, in the traditional and unceded territory of the Passamaquoddy people. Well, hello, one and all. Welcome to the 98th episode of the Ad Non-Tech Podcast, if you can believe it. I kind of have to pinch myself sometimes to realize that we're just a hair's breadth away from the triple digits with this enterprise. And today we're kind of delving into the lifelong learning trip a bit. We're kind of stepping back into some themes we've checked on before variously. I'm certainly looking forward to it. I am Matt Stranick. This is Dr. Doug Reed, and really appreciate you for joining us here. Doug, how are things in your neck of the Maritimes today?
Today, things are good. Things are very good. Overall, no complaints. I actually cleaned the house today and felt good about doing it.
Awesome. Is that spring cleaning, as it were, being that we are on the third day of spring at the time of recording?
It was more spring tidying. I think spring cleaning is going to come later. But yeah, I tidied up a bunch of stuff, which was awfully nice. It's nice to get that off your head and off your thought process. So that's what I did today. How about you?
It brought you joy, so to speak.
It did. It did. It's like letting stuff go brings me joy.
Fantastic. Glad to hear that, pal.
And how are you doing this weekend?
Yeah, well, for those who are maybe not clocking everything we put out as we put it out, we actually took a week away from our normal-ish weekly recording schedule. I've had some things kind of in my life in terms of a new job starting out, and I got no complaints about that so far. It's okay. Nothing that isn't within the realm of what I think I'm capable of. What's interesting, as far as I can tell, is that this is the first job that I've had of any full-time significant measure in more than 20 years at this point. About 20 years, I should say, not more than 20 years, but it's outside the field of education. And I'm not sure how long that's going to go or what it's going to entail in terms of the months or years that I'm involved in this, but it's something where what I've been doing for the past 20 years isn't applicable, and yet it would be foolish to think that there isn't a lot of that past history with education that's going into it. So that's been interesting. I'm on the ground floor of a new industry, and it's, again, real fascinating to be in this position after this many years of being in education roles of various kinds, and I'm learning a lot. So that's been kind of preoccupying my bandwidth for the past week or so anyway. And yeah, I've done a couple of interviews for the Writers on Writing series. If anybody is ever interested in checking out even more content, first of all, I'm glad that you're checking out this Ad Non-Tech, but I've also been advancing a couple of interviews now. I have a few more lined up on writers talking about their writing practice and what that entails. So we got a couple of those interviews up this past week, which was interesting as well as starting the new job. And so, yeah, just real glad to be back here with Doug and getting into what we have as a pretty compelling topic here, Doug. Pretty compelling topic, I got to say. Why don't you tell us just a little bit more about what we're into this weekend, my friend?
I want to talk about obsolete best practice in education because
Okay.
there's a bunch of stuff that we do that people claim is best practice, and it's like, is it? Is it really? And I like to examine my beliefs and my understandings and what I think I know and what I actually know, just to make sure that everything flows. And
Make
this
sure
came
you're
out
working
of,
from some correct assumptions, as it were, making sure that anything you do going forward is on a sound basis, as it were.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because there's times when I do stuff and it's like, wait a second, is this still the best way to do this? There might be better ways. Or somebody might have shown me something else. On social media, I follow a bunch of rare book dealers because I
Okay.
don't know, however that happened, because I like old books, I guess. And one lady was talking about white glove treatment. And if I say white glove treatment, do you know what that means? Do you have a concept of what that is?
If I was to guess, I'd say they're putting on those sterile plastic gloves so as to not do any damage or cause any transference of, say, acids or oils from your grubby, greasy hands to the object in question.
Yes, sometimes they're silk gloves and sometimes they're cotton gloves, but they don't do that anymore. They have found that as you handle antique books and you kind of like swipe the pages and stuff, you are more likely to damage the book by ripping it or tearing it or catching part of the glove on it than the damage that the oil would do from your skin. So they took a look at it, and as soon as I saw that, I was like, "Oh, what white glove stuff do we do?" And more specifically, what glove stuff do I do? So that was just why I dug into this. It had nothing to do with education initially, but this is the Ed Non-Tech podcast. We can make it about education.
Well, outstanding, Doug. And I really like how, yeah, that's kind of a what metaphor, if you will, for other kinds of so-called best practices, which may not necessarily fit that proper description anymore. So, real interested to see what you've come up with here with these references and perhaps some personal and or other kinds of examples that will uncover along the way, my friend.
Yeah, me too. What I've got first is I traditionally go back and find the oldest reference I can find about whatever the topic is. This is from 1993, and it's Peters and Heron. When is the best not good enough? And examination of best practice in the Journal of Special Ed. And what they tell us is that the term best practice in education only started in the 1980s, and the special education field owned it. It didn't come out of anything else. It didn't come out of coaching. It didn't come out of English or math or whatever. It came out of special education. So I found that really interesting. And they talk about how the name got more pervasive each passing year, but it was only in the special ed literature. And that's where my first education degree is. It was technically in mainstreaming, but it's one of those things, right? They change these names so regularly with what things are called. So that was living experience of when I was doing my studies. So that was only like I started my BED in 89. So it was right around that time. And I just thought, oh, I was almost at the beginning of this. I was still, whatever, 10 years behind or 9 years behind. But it was just so neat to say, oh, that's where it came from. Because best practice is not a term I like. Best practice hides a lot of evils. It's, oh, we're going to, well, that's best practice. Well, show me the evidence. Who, the people that normally say, oh, that's just best practice, I feel that's a brush off more often than that's an actual best practice. It's, I don't want to talk about it, so we'll call that best practice and you won't question. Do you have a similar experience, or is this a bias of mine from
Well, I
I
have to say, I do question, I guess, the concept itself, with my first question sort of being, well, best for who, better than what? And it's sort of almost an implicitly, like it's casting shade on other types of approaches, which it's not going to go so far as to delineate or define. So, what you describe as kind of the brush off, it's almost implicit in the surrounding concept, which it speaks to, right? So, that's just from the semantics of it, I suppose, that I see that. In terms of my own experience or whatnot, I don't necessarily have that much to say to it, except that when you mentioned that you completed your B.Ed in 1989, is that correct, Doug?
started in '89.
89. Well, that's 19 years before I finished mine. And so if we're looking at what we bring to the value of this show, or years of experience or what have you, I'm not saying that Doug's path has been better or richer than mine per se, because this is sort of an equal partnership kind of deal. But I think it does speak to the variety of perspective which we're coming at this with, where I am staunchly an educator of the millennium, for better or for worse, because there's only about 10 years or so in age difference between Doug and I, but Doug has also gotten a good 20 plus years experience in the field of education, more so than what I have. So that is more than just accounting for sort of a age differential. That's accounting as well for a pretty significant period of practice. So anytime I get to hear about what Doug has experienced within that kind of 90s or late 20th century kind of time frame,
Oh, that
then I
hurts.
feel enriched. I feel benefited from this in a whole lot of ways. So there we go, Doug.
Late 20th century. That hurts, man. That feels like a long time ago.
It was kind of, but it also went by real fast, you know. So
True enough. True enough. I enjoyed the vast majority of it, so that works out. Something else Peters and Heron bring up is they talk about how the definition changed so much so rapidly. The definition of best practice. And they talk about how it wavered from the student back to the instruction, then back to the student, and that's just in 3 years, right? And this article came out in '93, so we're looking at 33 years ago. So how many other times has that definition sort of changed? Because it went from what skills are students going to need to what's the instructional method going to be, and then let's look at outcomes, look at the outcomes that the students are producing. And we're calling it best practice, and they don't even have a concept or conceptualization of what it is. So how do you call something best practice when the definition doesn't even know what we're looking at or what we're looking for and what we're trying to measure? So it was interesting, but that's where I wanted to start. Honestly, it's the white glove effect all over again.
who benefits from the framing of this? Who is less benefited? What are the power struggles implicit in that framing? Why did it become such a pervasive expression within the field of education in a relatively short amount of time? These are all really compelling questions that I think are implicit in what we were just describing there, what you were just talking about, Doug. So appreciate getting the setup there, getting us wound up for our investigation, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah. And that leads us to Blackburn 2005, the next article that I have. And it's Teaching, Learning, Doing. Best Practices in Education. It's from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And what Blackburn talks about is best practices in teaching should help physicians meet these challenges with new skills that enable them to improve communication and be more effective agents of change. So when we slide off into medical education and medical training, it's about communication and being change agents. And it's like, wow, is that, I don't know about you, but I've had some medical professionals work with me that have been not the best communicators. They might be skilled, but communication was not their forte. And I have some educators that I know that are exactly the same. They're good teachers, whatever that means, but their communication skills in staff rooms would be painful. Or you watch them go into a class and you're like, thank goodness my kid's not in their class. That sort of thing. I never had children, so I never had that actual feeling. But I know people that did have children that said, we're going to take them out of this entire school because that person's there. We're going to put them in this other school instead. It's like, so are we looking at communication and being change agents? I didn't know being a change agent was actually one of the things I was supposed to do. I thought I was supposed to help people on a journey. I don't see that as a change agent, but that's my conceptualizations. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, sure. I do appreciate the need for effective communication within education, as in any professional area. I definitely have had some experience with medical practitioners who have, for one reason or another, maybe needed some perhaps area of improvement with that a bit. And I think, just if I can speak sort of a little bit outside the lines, I think that right now we're in a pretty interesting situation in Canada, where in the medical fields and in other fields as well, where there's a sort of shortage, I guess, of Canadian born practitioners. And so you end up having a lot of new Canadians or people from other countries kind of filling in these roles. And so if you just sort of think about what the notion of communication is for, say, a doctor who's coming from somewhere in Asia or, another country, another area, what that entails in terms of bedside manner, in terms of communicating effectively. And I'm not saying that as pejoratively, but I'm just saying that the notion of communication, it's not just the words you use and how you speak, but it's cultural consideration, and the fact that we have in Canada now, over the past 10 or 15 years, really significantly increased the number of people, for various legitimate reasons from other countries, what that communication piece even looks like now in our specific context. Now, to speak to professional jargon, generally speaking, every professional group, it seems like, has their own way of communicating that the layperson may not necessarily get at first blush, right? And so I'm now on the very entry level of working in the legal industry. I'm a legal assistant. That's my new job. And it's super interesting so far, But I have to tell you that just after a couple of days on the job, hearing the terminology with the lawyers, the people whose office I work in, flying around, and all the associated precedents, all the associated standards of documentation and statutes that go along with those, they all pertain to different conceptual frameworks, different areas of knowledge, different ways of being and sharing and communicating than anything I've encountered thus far. And so it's all in English, sure, and it's all by and large folks who are from Canada and are speaking English as folks who grew up speaking English. But because of the vastly different professional area, I don't have a wider schema to connect it to. So a lot of my challenge right now is to build that schema, and to make myself effective, I really have to get on board pretty quickly with what is being spoken of and signified with a lot of this jargon, right? This professional jargon. And so you could also make the same kind of case for the field of education, I'm sure. And I think finally, just to point it out, your point about effective agents of change agents, that to me sounds like a bit of a catchphrase. It sounds like a bit of a shortcut. It sounds like kind of a phrase of the week kind of thing, but maybe I'm wrong on that.
Yeah. I'm not sure what agents of change mean. And I just to step back a sec, I've had a lot of medical practitioners that have been fantastic communicators. They've been amazing. They've explained stuff in ways that have helped me and helped my family and friends and stuff, all the rest. But I just have a couple. It's like when people start talking about stories about when they were in school, and everybody has that one cruddy teacher, and that's the story they tell. Like in my head, I had one particular doctor that wasn't my doctor, but I ended up seeing him, and it was like, boy, oh boy, we could work on your communication just a little. But it was just neat that because I love the medical model. It's the teaching, learning, doing model, where it's like see one, do one, teach one. And so
Right.
they experience stuff 3 times, and that structure works. And it's like, awesome. Maybe if we could do more of that in our practice, maybe that would help us too. But that's just not the infrastructure that we've been living in. So
Maybe.
yeah, it'd be something that might be good to have a go at. What I'd like to do is jump to Robin's 2009 best practices on best practices, and this is legal
Ooh.
education. So I was all over the place. We started in special education. That's where the term best practices came from, and now we're all over. So I just kind of enjoyed that. And they have a bit of a longer quote that I'm going to read here. Best practices seemingly offer clear, crisp, logical, actionable ideas on how to deal with inherently uncertain questions. In reality, however, the concept presents a series of problems related to creation, implementation, and success. And I went so far as I pulled some more stuff out. Normally, I just try to grab clips of things. And they list 4 things that are problematic with best practices. One is no objective goals, no objective standards, no methodology, conflicting, confusing, or wrong best practices. So this is 17 years ago in legal education. They're saying, yeah, we got an issue with this term. This term is not being used in a manner that's most effective for people. And I just enjoy the fact that I'm not alone. There's other people saying, hey, we've got something here that could be great, but we're not that great yet. And I've absolutely been told, okay, put together your practice on whatever, and no goals, no standards, no methodology, and like contradicting, confusing. It's like, oh, you're killing me. how about I just do what I always do and don't change anything and just document everything I've done to make sure my butt is covered? That it's like, okay, well, that's not being a change agent. That's not having clearer communication. That's not helping the students with output. So what are we doing here? And again, that just comes back to my bias.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that in this case, it's almost just like a box labeled best practice, but then you open it up and there's nothing inside of it. It's kind of just a phrase that's being used without real reference to the context in which it's meant to be intended. And I think where everything that we've talked about over the course of the show has really emphasized the individual connection to circumstances, to the significance of context within the practice. It's almost like to say to generalize and to assume that a generalization, which is implicit in the concept of best practice, to sort of say that a generalization is going to work or be effective across a wide range of contexts without really connecting to them meaningfully, that seems like an argument for failure. It seems like just some empty verbiage. It seems like something that somebody is saying as a shortcut, but they don't have the destination that they're trying to get to connected to it. But that's just my first thoughts on reading this quote and those very helpful delineations there.
Thanks. I really like the way you structured that. And I think that's something that we could apply to best practices and apply to communication. It's, hey, let's be clear. What are the objective goals? What are the objective standards? What methodology would you like me to follow? Okay, yeah, this is conflicting with something else. Let's address that. I'm a big fan of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Very much so.
Let's do the work ahead of time, because then it'll be less work later and it'll flow more smoothly. I'm a really big fan of that.
I think that applies both to the legal education case, which we're referring to here, and also to the medical education case as far as it goes. Anything involving precedent or statutes or what you can see coming and how to delay or affect that outcome in a positive manner, that's all legit in terms of what you're saying here, pal.
Yeah, and to take it one step further, to go back to the special ed example, where what are we talking about? Is it about the students? Is it about the delivery? Or is it about something else? And special education couldn't do it either. So everybody seems, all these different disciplines seem to be having the same struggle with how the terminology is used or applied or whatever is happening in these industries and in these parts of society.
Well, and I think if I may, to stick with that special education example, only because I spent a few months in that world from December until February, just this past, the past few months. I think that in terms of the shifting focus of the term, any practice that doesn't rest with the student at its center, without being in the student's best interest, if the focus is on an instructional method for its own sake, if the focus is on what's most expedient or in the best interest of the instructor per se, anytime that you're not putting the student at the center or giving them agency, right? Giving them agency within the context of a definition, then as far as educational practice, whatever you're calling it, I think you may be moving away from what is ideal, right? So giving I don't want to use the term end user, but or the audience, but giving the student, giving the student agency is what I think any educational endeavor is really meant to be about and what it's meant to achieve. And any terminology should keep that at its focus. And if there's questions about that within any term or concept, then maybe you need to rework your concept or put it aside.
I think that's why we get along, because I feel the same way. My bias is always, we're here to help the students, so let's help the
Absolutely.
students. I was shocked. I was shocked when I left K to 12 teaching and then came back so I could move my pension. I described that a year or two ago. So I went
Yep.
back into the K to 12 system, and it was like, whoa, what's going on? Why is there so much paperwork now? I thought there was a lot of paperwork in the 90s, and paperwork has exploded now. Here's the report you got to fill in. Here's the extra meetings you have to go to. Here's this, here's that, here's the other thing. And it's like, wow, none of this. Like, I taught for a long time. And it was just shocking to me that, oh, part of best practice now is let's do a ton of work on paperwork. It's like that.
Navigating the administrative tsunami.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember in the 80s, I read some stuff about what happened when computers came into post-secondary. All of a sudden, every department that used to have a secretary, they didn't have the secretary anymore because people had to type their own stuff now because they had the computer so they could. And that changed the jobs so much, the way these things kind of do. And I don't have that article here, and I don't have the authors memorized or anything, but it's one of those interesting things like, whoa, okay, the computers were a change agent, but they changed a lot more than we thought they were going to change. What I'd like to do now is jump to the Lunsford 2009 article, In Defense of Teaching Outdated Material. And there's some outdated material, like I use outdated material all the time in this podcast. If I'm going back to stuff from the 1800s and the early 1900s, even the late 1900s, or the late 20th century, or whatever term you just used, right? It's a lot of that's out of date. But I like to know where we come from. And Lunsford talks about too often we seek the most up-to-date material at the expense of the monumental work that defined a discipline. We must, of course, stay up to date on current trends in our field. However, we must also remember that the insights of tomorrow are dependent on knowledge of the past. I love that whole quote. When I found that, I was so tickled. It was, yep, this is my thought. We need to know where we came from. It's like that whole people that don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And people that do know history are doomed to watch people that don't know history repeat it.
And you're not just saying that because you're a history major.
No, I love history. So that works out. And I was a history major back in the day, but I love saying, where were we? How do you know what's best practice if you don't know what the other practices are? Like, how could you possibly figure that in? Oh, this is best practice. Well, what are other ways to approach this? And it's the other ways. Like, I was a researcher. I was a tenured professor. I had to figure out the other ways to do stuff. So I had to know what had happened before to go to, no, that's not going to work because. And I remember those staff meetings where I was a young teacher and the old timers were at the back of the room and people would, here's a new initiative. And the old ones are like, nope, I'm not going to do it. We tried that 15 years ago. It didn't work. And it was all new to me. I didn't know the difference. And yeah, most of those initiatives died quickly. You'd get them at the end of August, beginning of September, and by November, they were gone. Nobody remembered them. It was, don't even bring it up. Nobody wants to hear about this. And it's like, okay, that's the way we go. So with you, you get to build. You're on a steep learning curve right now. You get to sit down and say, okay, what does this mean when it's said this way? What do I have to go do? Like every time I start a new job, it's people will say something, and I'm like, okay, why does that matter? They just look at me, so it matters. I have no clue what the context is to figure out why it matters. And Lunsford is talking about you need to know the context. You need to know the structure underneath everything to see what infrastructure goes, so what you have to do and what can wait and what can't wait. And a lot of that just comes with experience.
It's true. And for me to be 40, I'm turning 48 years old here, just a couple months. And so to be now at the entry point of a profession where I could be doing this for 3 or 4 months, I could be doing this for another 20, 25 years, depending on how it goes. It's really an eye-opening experience to sort of establish the wider schema and figure out what I need to do to move something forward relative to this new framework, this new place that I find myself in, and to have that tied specifically to a, say, work deliverable on any given day. How does it fit? How does my action fit within that? So it's an interesting spot to be in. It's exciting. It's fun as far as it goes. And yeah, I think a lot of what you're describing here resonates in terms of what I've been experiencing and what I'm looking at coming down the stretch for the next little while.
Yeah, it makes sense. And once you get over the learning curve, it's like, oh, you can take a breath.
That's right.
And say, okay, this is the job. This is what I have to do.
It's not like the learning stops, but it slows enough down to the point where it's something that it comes out incrementally. You know what the daily routine would tend to be. You know the ebbs. You know the flows. You know the ins and outs. You know the lay of the land, right? So I'm looking forward to that part of it. But again, I'm also, because I'm a middle-aged dude, because I'm 47 and I've had 20 years career thus far doing something else, I also am not overly stressed about it because, I mean, what's the possible repercussions for making a mistake? It's like, well, okay, I did something wrong, whatever, fire me or don't, right? I'm not really too put out by the fear of failure the way I might have been when I was in my 20s or earlier on in my larger career. It's like, I've done other things successfully. I guess I'll do this successfully. And if I don't, then it won't be the end of the world. But it's something where it's just take it one day at a time, see what the day has for you, and try and figure out, based on everything that's going on around you, the best way forward. Not to say what the best practices are, because I think at this point we're kind of coming up critically against that term, Doug, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, that's very fair.
And so if we're talking on the show about outdated best practices, it's not almost like it's an oxymoron because they're not contradictory here, but we're not giving too much credit to the term of best practices. And so we haven't spent a ton of time yet on the outdated aspect of this, and maybe we're going to, in terms of what some of these that used to be thought of as good practice or best practices or whatever, that no longer are. And I suspect we may have some salient examples coming up here, Doug.
Oh, we have a list. Yeah. But that's not as academic. So I want to get through the articles to get us there.
Completely so.
The Texaido article, Pedagogy in the 21st Century, is where I wanted to end up. And is it possible that what was done in the past to prepare teachers is still viable today?
Oh,
and
I hope so.
That's where I wanted to end. because it's one of those don't throw the baby out with the bathwater sort of things. There's a lot of stuff that was done 20, 50, 100, 200 years ago that still works now. Absolutely still works. And we've had so many examples of things that worked back in the day that still work now because people haven't fundamentally changed. If I want to get better at doing something, I go do it. Listening to somebody tell me how to do it does not make me better. Giving me the chance, because I'm a social constructionist, giving me the chance to try it and then talk, that makes it better. I had some ideas and some experience with podcasts, but now that we've done this for almost 100 episodes now, I think I'm a better podcaster than I was when we started this endeavor 4 seasons ago. I think that's a fair comment. Right? I've seen my growth.
Definitely.
And evaluated myself that way. So that's why I keep trying to add other little things to this just to try to spice it up a bit.
Well, and to speak to what's worked well in the past, I mean, I am thinking here of the Socratic method in terms of using questions to elicit responses in the interest of developing knowledge and moving education forward. I mean, that goes back to those who aren't knowledgeable necessarily on the history of philosophy. We are talking about the dialogues of Plato featuring the very historical person, the philosopher from the late 500s and early 400s BC in one Socrates. And I've been spending a fair bit of time going back over or expanding my knowledge by reading those dialogues, things I haven't looked at since university or maybe that I'd never looked at, but because of my interest that started talking about on this show a few years ago on the Stoic philosophers with Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Cicero, and the like, I just kind of go, okay, well, they keep referring to Socrates, they keep referring to Plato, they keep referring to Heraclitus, they keep referring to Homer, they keep referring to these various other authors of antiquity. And so, just out of an interest in getting a full schema for that understanding, I've been going through it. And so, the Socratic method, in terms of leading with questions, it's something that's been part of the Western tradition for 2,500 years at this point, longer even than that. And that still seems to be pretty effective. Inquiry driven education goes back at least that far, right? So to speak of things that have worked in the past that are still in use, right?
Well, that's where it comes to my obsolete best practices that still exist and the things that we've learned, like bloodletting. Back in the day, bloodletting was seen as a big thing. Here's how you heal somebody, get that blood out, get the new blood in. And I remember about 15 years ago, there was a medical program that was going to look for leeches because when they put leeches had whatever chemicals they released to stop clotting. So there was a value, not in the old days with how they did bloodletting, but it's like, oh, here's how we can apply it clinically now. So it's a process that has a dirty reputation and, oh no, don't want to do that. And like, oh no, but this works. This part is good. And it was nice to see them come and evolve their thinking to say, oh, okay, we were doing that in the past because we didn't know better. Now we do know better. We've applied a lot of thought to it. And let's give this a go. And it works. Right? It's sending faxes. When was the last time you sent a fax? Right? That was a skill.
Interesting experience. The first couple of days of my job at one of the 2 law offices that I'm based out of, and the fax is still actually used for certain types of property transactions in the province of New Brunswick anyway.
Wow.
And much of that is to do with the fact there's certain interaction between a lawyer's office who's facilitating property transaction and the provincial government of New Brunswick,
Wow.
Service New Brunswick, and it can be accomplished by fax, and it's preferred, it's the required for certain types of documents, certain types of standards with the provincial government at the government's requirement, because it's not as easy to hack as these
Right.
other online systems, as these advanced digital online systems. A fax is a very, very, very basic method of conveying certain kinds of documentation, certain kinds of information. And as such, it is far, far, far less prone to being intercepted or compromised or falsified than an email or other types of online communication.
Oh, that is fantastic. I wrote these notes before I knew you were getting that job, but so
Oh,
thanks.
it's all good. It's
That's
I saw
cool.
that one and I went, huh, I just experienced this the past 3 or 4 days. So
Right. So if the priority is making it harder to hack, right? Yep.
yeah,
We have a system for that.
analog methods. That's right.
Yeah.
Or
They
lo-fi anyway. Yeah.
exactly. Another one is teaching cursive writing. The the research is now in. I might do a whole episode on cursive writing because I had good penmanship back in the day, right? Like I enjoyed writing and making it pretty and all the rest. And now people have gone in and said, "Oh, here's all the good things about writing with a pencil or a pen that you don't get when you type. It engages different parts of your brain." So some places are coming back to cursive writing and getting away from keyboarding to say, yeah, this
Well,
still matters. We need to keep
you
doing
may
it.
have noticed, Doug, I don't do cursive writing
Oh,
as
yeah.
such, but one thing I've been doing with my portion of the notes that are up on the WordPress site is that I've been
Yeah.
composing on a ruled notebook. And I just find that in terms of how I express my thinking and how the process of writing feels in the moment, it's a much more satisfying experience for me to compose by pen and paper. It's just cognitively and I suppose emotionally a better experience for me. And then, in the interests of getting it into the notes, I just rip out the page, put it on my scanner, save it as a PDF, and then embed it into the notes. And I think, for my purposes, it maybe it's not that much different than what I might express at the end of the day were I typing it, but it's way more satisfying. And to me, for the type of endeavor that this is, it's something that it feels more natural. It feels more right. So
And I enjoy reading your notes. I have to admit, the first couple of times, it was like, oh, somebody needs a penmanship lesson. But that's my bias. And when I read it, it was like, oh
absolutely,
no, I like this. I like the flow. I like the structure. It's the computer doesn't get in the way of it.
it feels
It's
way
that,
more personal. And I
yeah,
like the fact that we have the digital capability of kind of coming up with these hybrid solutions, these custom
yeah,
hybrid solutions, if you will, that are suitable in each context, which, if you want to get to it, is probably one of the themes that this show would be trying to express, right? So I feel
absolutely.
like it checks a few different boxes, but for me, there's nothing more satisfying than getting something down in my quasi printed, kind of slightly messy, you know, chicken scratch. I probably could go for some training in cursive, but that disappeared from our school curriculum at Forest Hill Elementary. The last time I took it would have been in grade 3. And it wasn't given a significant value going forward. There was no opportunity to use it in any of our other subject areas outside of the language arts class in the K to 3 setting. And then from there on out, it was the dawn of the information age in the late mid 80s. So
Yep,
from there on
that's
out,
it.
it just kind of went the way of the dodo, so to speak, right? So
Yeah, and now people are looking back saying, "Oh, look at the value we're losing. We need
look
to go
what we
back to
lost,
it."
right? I
Yeah,
have to think that there's a lot of, I've had the conversations with my mom in the past about the benefit that you get from fine motor, activity of any kind, right? Whether it's
yeah,
cross stitch, whether it's doing anything with your hands that's kind of in a repetitive kind of motion, you're coming up with neuron kind of activity, synaptic activity. It's getting exercise that it wouldn't have otherwise, and grained activity that you're getting through repetitious motor skill, fine motor skill, like penmanship, like calligraphy, whatever, that would have to be beneficial. I just can't think of
oh
it as
yeah,
being otherwise, right?
oh it definitely is. It definitely is. Yeah, when I read your notes, it reads very poetically. Like when
Mm-hmm.
it feels like a poem, not just like when I write, it's dot points and it's whatever. Like that's because how my brain works. And I read yours, and it feels like poetry. And I've never really understood poetry, but I like it. And I know that poems are there. So I'm always that little bit of how do I start writing like that? How do I start making the change to get there?
Well, it,
So
it becomes something, at least with the poetry, where I just read a lot of poetry. I have, let's see, in terms of the books that I have on the go right now, I mean, I have 7 or 8 books, and even if I only pick them up once a week, let's see, John Thompson, he's a poet who passed
yep,
away from New Brunswick. He kind of lived a short but violent life. I've got the works of the Emperor Julian, some ancient, not so much ancient, but 300s, Roman history.
that's pretty
I got
old. Yeah.
Moby Dick. So I've got philosophy, I've got poetry, I've got a novel, I'm reading the Iliad, which by Homer, which I find kind of some heavy going. I only pick that up about once a week, but I mean, that's epic poetry. I've got Epictetus, the Stoic
Yes.
philosopher. I've got Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. And then I've also got some Thomas Transtromer, a Swedish Nobel winning prize. Uh, he's a Swedish poet. He won the Nobel Prize. He was also a psychologist, and he's amazing. So I try and keep a varied diet, and I just kind of chip away at all of them, and then eventually I finish it. But I guess to speak to the point, not just to brag about
No,
what I'm
no.
reading per se, it's just you take on the characteristics of what you put in your brain. And if you want to write in a certain kind of manner, then just reading the kind of stuff that you'd be interested to write, it's just kind of, you eat certain kinds of food to feel a certain way physically. You read certain kinds of things to feel a certain way mentally, I suppose.
Oh yeah, yeah, very true. Like the last poetry I went through was Robbie Burns, the
Awesome.
Scottish poet, and some of that
Fantastic.
it's beautiful, and I don't understand it.
It's awesome that there are things that we don't understand, but we can still appreciate. It's
Yes.
something where if we just looked at everything and we just immediately felt like we knew everything about it, then I mean, what's even the point of looking at it in the first place, right? The fact that language, something that was written hundreds of years ago, still has the ability to inspire or make us curious or make us confused. It's a wonderful thing to be confused, I think, by worthwhile subjects or topics or whatever. So,
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that with me because that was the direction I wanted to head, and I didn't know where to start. And I figured, hey, I know who might know.
and you have some
So,
outstanding other practices here, memorizing a phone number. God, I can't. If if my
oh,
if I had to tell somebody from the police department what my kids' phone numbers were, I would be screwed. I would have to like, okay, I need my phone or I need my computer or something because I don't have that in my brain, right? I
yeah.
don't know my girlfriend's phone number. I don't know like any of this. So that's a pretty good example, right, of something that we've lost.
Well, I can still tell you my phone number from when I was 7 years old. Right? Like that's burned into my head. 895-2060. I have no clue who has that number now, but that was our number. And we had to wait for the second ring because it was one of those party lines. Ours was like 2 long rings. If it was 2 short rings, that was the neighbor. If it was a long ring and a short ring, that was the other neighbor. That sort of stuff. So I don't know if they have party lines anymore. Probably not in the age of digital.
I remember party lines from when I visited my grandparents who lived in Newton, New Brunswick, about half an hour outside of Fredericton, and they had a rotary telephone, which I notice is also on your list here.
Yep.
Yeah, these are all, a lot of them, most of them to do with technology in some way. I noticed you got observing daylight savings time there, which is kind of funny, just in as much as BC is no longer going along
Yeah.
with that, nor is Saskatchewan for that matter. I think those are the only 2 jurisdictions in Canada. I'd be surprised. I'm kind of surprised Alberta hasn't gone that way, just to be different, but anyway.
Well, yeah, I don't think Saskatchewan ever went, and now that
Okay.
BC has stopped, so yeah. So if for listeners, if you want to go to the podcast to the website, we've got we've got a list of those things, like even overhead projectors. Right, I know how to use an overhead projector. I know how expensive the bulbs are, so you don't want to burn it out. So you got to start it a certain way, and you can't turn it off. Whatever. Like there's a whole process to overhead projectors that just aren't really a thing anymore because that's.
And closely associated with this, I see that you do have the obsolete disciplines and skills, yes, including some of these, which I feel like we'd be better off if we'd maintain them somehow. I like the fact that you have etiquette and manners included here. Like,
these are all things taught in school. This
okay.
Obsolete disciplines and skills. It's just like moral education. That used to be a subject. You would get graded on that. Right? Elocution. Yeah, it's how do we talk, right? And how do you present yourself in your deportment and all that. The home economics one I really
catalog.
Enjoyed. Oh man, I'd love to get a card catalog.
Me too. I would love that. I'd love to just be able to flash back and have the option to use card catalog at the public library.
Oh yeah, I would like to take one and refinish it, and have it right here by my computer, and I could have all the little drawers pull out and store different stuff in different drawers. But that's just one of those things. Floppy disk lessons. Do you remember we talked about floppy disks a lot in the last episode?
We did.
One thing we didn't talk about is how to make it writable and how to make it not writable. Because the big floppies, the big 5.5-inch floppies, had a little chunk cut out of it, and if the chunk was out, then you could write to the disk, but you could get this little piece of black tape to cover over that chunk, and then it wasn't writable anymore. The computer wouldn't write to it because that chunk wasn't there. It's just silliness like that. It's just obsolete information that I will never need to know again, but it's taking up space in my brain.
And yet you did spend significant amount of time at one point in your life learning this stuff, being aware of it, using it in whatever way.
Yeah.
And now we've gone further downstream, so was it worth knowing it in the first place? Yeah, probably, because you needed to at the time. You look back on it now, though, and it's like maybe we throw things out perhaps a bit too readily. Maybe if we held on to some of these things, we'd get a better investment of our time and energy. I don't know.
Yeah. So I listed some there. There's even abacus use. You ever used an abacus? That used to be a class. in math, you learned how to use an abacus. When I was in grade 11, we had a school trip and we went to the Soviet Union. Right, so I was
Whoa.
whatever 15 or 16 or whatever, and we went to Red Square. Like we went to Moscow. We went to a bunch of places. Right, it was one of those. It was 2 bus loads.
It's crazy.
Yeah, but in Red Square, they had like a mall, like a shopping mall right next to it. But it's unlike any shopping mall I was ever in before, and nobody had cash registers. Everybody was using abacuses or abaci. I don't know the plural. And I was just watching them click, 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 click. And they were amazing with it. And I had no clue what was happening. So it was still being used actively in my lifetime. So this was 84. So it'd be in your lifetime too.
Definitely.
Just not here. So there's the list of obsolete skills and disciplines that used to matter. People used to get graded, and now they really just don't exist. So it tells me, what are we doing? Right? Why are these things that matter so much? And you talked about just like, okay, I'm at an age now where, okay, if I'll do my best, but the world's not going to come to an end if I don't get graded perfectly on whatever this activity is.
Well, exactly so. And some of these technology items are helpfully included among the visual stuff.
Yes, my digital clutter, I kind of dumped a bunch of stuff here. Is there any of these images that you would love or like to talk about?
Well, what I like is that one of them clearly is an AI product. It's got the cassette, the very large cassette sitting on the shelf there next to the CD, next to what looked like a camera, and below
Yeah.
that, a rotary phone, and below that, I mean, I'm 98% sure that image was generated with an AI application. And so, like, the dimensions of it for these things seem perhaps a bit off. I guess maybe I'm noticing that cassette tape or whatever seems just a little bit large. But I kind of just, it tickles me that there's this image which includes like this calculator looking device, I suppose it is, a typewriter, these various forms of camera, and like it's on a bookshelf, very antique looking bookshelf. I like the fact that the current AI technology was used to produce this image of these antiquated, supposedly obsolete technologies.
Yeah, it has that AI feel to it.
It does. The hyper saturated, high level of resolution dots, high amount of dots per square inch DPI. It's just it's got that gloss to it. It's
Did you
yeah.
ever see the movie The Polar Express? It was like an animated movie. Tom Hanks did a
I
voice.
did. I actually saw that not even that long ago. It was weirdly, I ended up seeing that like before Christmas on a thing, but
Oh,
yes, I know what you mean. Yeah.
it's because that animation was just off a little. Like it had an ick factor. It was like the last generation of movie animation that came out that was at that level. Like I watched part of that movie and it was just like, oh, this is just throwing me. I want to like the story, and I like pretty well everything Tom Hanks is in and stuff, but it was just there was just something off, and this picture feels like that. It's just there's just something not right.
Well, and whereas when you watch perhaps an animated feature from days gone by until the 80s, or I suppose even the 90s, it looked like a drawing. It looked
Yes,
like somebody
it just did.
was drawing it, whether it's cell by cell or whether they automated it or whatever. but like for instance, those early Disney images, and even into features that they would share in the 80s. I remember from when I was a kid, some of these films, it's like, yeah, that's supposed to be looking like somebody drew that by hand, and that's what you're watching, and that's part of the appeal, right?
Yeah.
But
So I have one image that I really enjoyed, and
okay,
it's a circle within a circle, and it says, "If you're over 40, you know what this is." And it's tell me you know what it is because you just told us you were over 40. It's the very first picture on the.
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it. My initial thought would be a mouse tracking ball,
Yeah,
maybe.
well done,
Okay,
man. I I'm gonna have
okay.
to try to stump you someday
Phew.
because I can't stump you. I remember opening those up and cleaning them and getting the dirt off the ball because all of a sudden you'd be rolling it around and all of a sudden things would just come to a screeching halt. And now there hasn't been a mouse built like that in decades, which is kind of scary. But I just really enjoyed finding that picture. It was like, oh yeah, I know what that is.
Awesome.
So I have three last things. There's
Perfect.
other digital clutter there if people want to go to the website and take a look. That's
Please do. Yeah.
but I have the word, question, and phrases of the podcast. The word of the podcast is best practice because that's what we were trying to get to. That's what I was trying to focus on. The question of the podcast is who decides what best practice is?
Awesome.
And I have my opinions on it, and I've shared some of them. But phrases of the podcast, there's two of them. Giving the student agency, that you made that comment, and I really loved it because that's my bias. That's what I think education's all about. And then empty verbiage was the other comment that you made, which I think describes best practice really well. So those are my two favorite phrases of the podcast.
Well,
So that's
perfect.
what I've got.
Awesome. Well, I cannot possibly argue with any of that. And if I did, I'd be disingenuous or flat out wrong. So I'm just going to say I've really enjoyed our conversation today, Doug. Was there anything else you wanted to add here, my friend, before we wind her down?
I am wondering what is on the image behind you that I've
Oh,
stared
fair
at.
enough.
What is it?
Yeah.
Carmen's Diner?
Okay, so what this is actually this is a holdover. I did an interview with a writer and musician named Franz Nicolay, who's a member of a band that I like, and he's a pretty significant writer. And I interviewed him for the Writers on Writing
Yes.
interview series, and it was cool. It went pretty well, but I thought, well, this guy's in upstate New York somewhere near the college that he teaches at, and he lives there with his family. And I thought, well, what's going to be representative of where I'm currently at? And this place, Carmen's Diner, has been operating here in St. Stephen, New Brunswick, in Charlotte County for some, I want to say 75 years is what somebody told me, I think. Might not be, I might be not remembering that exactly, but this is a picture that I took when I was strolling down towards uh, downtown St. Stephen from where I currently am. And I thought, well, okay, we'll add some local flavor to this. My best friend's mom and grandma both worked at this place over the years. Somebody I'm friends with from college or for university, rather, who she grew up in this town and she said, yeah, that's my favorite place to go, when I'm in town or when I was in high school. So it's kind of iconic relative to St. Stephen, New Brunswick, which is a very small place, but very nice. So, yeah, that's what that's all about, my friend.
Right on. I was just curious because normally your backgrounds are thematic. So I didn't know if there was
Yeah,
something
well,
obsolete.
I was thinking about sort of changing it and having it associated perhaps in some way specifically with the show, but then I thought, well, the background's already there from the interview, and it is somewhat historical and cultural in nature. So I just I left it in. But
Right on. Thanks. I appreciate you telling me that.
well, absolutely. Well, as I say, I've enjoyed the chat here very much. Thanks a lot for being here, everybody. I'm going to say adios. I'm going to say goodbye. Hope you're all well, and we'll see you around next time.
Bye bye.
Take care, everybody.